Good morning, everybody. This is webinar number 51 with Uncle Pete's Corner, number 4, and it's Friday, February 22nd, 2013. And welcome to y'all. And we will have Pete starting now, and he's going to talk about TreeView Control. After this, we're going to stop the recording, and Andy Stapleton's going to pick up with TreeView Table Control, and they will kind of clarify what those two things mean because I was confused. Okay, so Pete, it's all yours.
Good morning. So yes, as Arnold alluded to, it sounded like me and Andy are talking about the same thing, but we are definitely not. The tree there are two completely different controls. One is the tree view control, which is its own separate little thing. You probably have seen it most often as a file explorer. And if you see what's on my screen, you notice that kind of looks like the old-fashioned file explorer. You got your root nodes, and you can expand and contract. That is the control I am going to talk about. The control Andy's going to talk about is a tree view table control. The difference being the magic word table, which means that it works very similar to a standard table. And that brings a lot of advantages. Unfortunately, the problem is that control is not available in version 17 of WebDev. So I had to use a tree view control to accomplish what I wanted to accomplish. Now, I am told that the tree view table control is available with version 18 of WebDev, so sounds like next go around we'll be able to use the one Andy's going to show you tonight. But even though I can answer the first question, yes, tree views are evil and mean spirited. I was able to beat it into submission after once again reading the Fringlish help a few times and kind of understanding how they wanted it to work. So
a good friendly company never hurt.
You don't have to do that. Exactly. So that's what I'm going to show you this morning so that you don't have to spend a couple of hours of frustration that I did figuring out how this thing wants to work. As you see, here's the full blown out thing. Yes, sir.
Pete, before you start, just so you guys know, on the right side we have the information in the chat and the attendee list. Okay, if you go to where Pete's talking, at the top right corner of that pod is a full screen. So when you just want to watch him, just click on that so it overrides the other stuff. And that way I can leave this other things up while he's talking. That's all I want to say. Thanks.
All right.
So try that and see if that helps.
All right. So as you see, here's the full blown out view. And what I'm doing here for a recent project, we needed to do something that was similar to this on a web application where somebody is maintaining a CRM or something. You want to see the last 5, the customers that had the last recent activity, their invoices. So what we're seeing here is a list of our most recent customers and the most recent invoices for those customers. So it makes a quick little jump list, and you'll notice that if we click, we see that we've got invoice ID 5. So we could have plumbed an invoice screen to jump up when they click that. If I go to this one, we can also see that when we click on the customer, we get customer ID too. So now we could have went to a screen that shows us the entire customer summary, so to speak. So that's what we're trying to use this for. You could use it for pretty much any type of menuing system, but it really lays itself out well for this type of hierarchical presentation of data that is in that grandparent, parent, child type of relationship. So that's what I was trying to do, and a TreeView was pretty much my only option available with WebDev 17. A couple of things as far as definitions that'll help you along the way. Your very top one is your root. Within your root, you have nodes, and then your very bottom level are your leaves. Now, you can go as many levels as you want. The only thing that's a root is the top level. The only thing that's a leaf is your very bottom level. Everything in between is a node. No matter how many levels you go down, they're all called nodes until you get to that very end, and that is called the leaf.
So can you have more than one tree root in your forest?
Yeah. In fact, if you look at, I generally don't do a root technically. I do just nodes because I really have no need to compress it all the way down. Yeah, I just want to compress it down to customers. So the way I've got this configured, these are all actually roots.
Okay.
Yeah, but if you wanted, you could do it that way, and then you can compress the whole thing down. So it's just a matter of, style and preference. So where I struggled with this thing and what makes TreeView so much tougher to work with than TreeView tables is the dealing with duplicates and so forth. A TreeView manages this whole node hierarchical pattern for you. And like anything else, when it manages it for you, it introduces its own set of challenges because it doesn't always manage it for you the way you wanted it managed. And I'll show you the first issue I had with this. In my particular requirement, I had to be able to support duplicate customer names. Different customers with the exact same name. So, hang on just a second here. Let me shut the alarm off. I'm already up. Oh, not the invoice. Customer. And all I'm doing, I'm going to go in here and Steve Jones, I'm going to say he's also Pete Halsted because, you can't have too many Pete Halsteds in the world.
Oh, yeah, you can.
Okay, now. Oh, that didn't take. Okay, that one. Now, the way I built this thing the first time, being an SQL guy, I tried to write an SQL statement that gave me a nice flat view of customer and invoice all in one SQL statement. Pretty much the way I would approach gathering all that data. I like to get the data in one fell swoop. The problem with that is when I did that and built my TreeView, notice even though I have two Pete Halsteds, his invoices, I've got one Pete Halsted here, and I've got the invoices for both guys mushed together under him. And the reason for that, it goes back to this whole thing about the TreeView managing where things go for me. And when we start looking at the code, you'll see what I'm talking about here. I'm running this off of a query, so let's go look at my query. My query is just taking customer and invoice and linking them together by customer ID. So if I run this query, there's my list of customers and their invoices. And notice there's two Pete Halsteds here, but that they have different customer IDs. So that's the data that we're getting in. Now, I figured, you know, if I do that and I give, when you're coding, you have this thing called a unique identifier on the tree add statement. I figured as long as each one had a unique identifier, I'd be good. The way you code your actual hierarchical is right here. You do your root tab node, or in my case, I only have 2 levels, so that's the description of my first level. That's customer name. A tab to indicate the next level, and that's invoice number. So as you see, just doing this one nice simple statement made it look like it was working. You know, and you know, very quick, very easy. The only problem is, like I said, that's really 2 different Pete Halsteds, and I fought with this thing and fought with this, reading up on handling duplicates, and it gives you all the clues on how to do this, but once again, those clues are in Fringlish. So it took me a little while to figure out, and what I finally figured out was I was using the thing wrong altogether. What you really do is you've got to build those levels one at a time. So what I'm doing here is, this is the one that works correctly. I loop through and build those customers first. And by doing that, I'm able to use the unique identifier for customer ID on those records. So those first set of roots, they go in with customer ID. And then I'm looping through my query the same as I did down below when I was doing it the wrong way, and I add those individual records under there. And when I'm doing that, now I'm using the invoice ID for unique identifier. And the last key to this thing is, when I add customer name as a root and make its unique identifier customer ID, when I want this next leaf to be attached to that root, when I do customer name, I also have to use this tree ID function to include the customer ID, whatever I made this unique identifier, with that name, so it knows. Otherwise, when it saw the 2 Pete Halsteds, it wouldn't know which one to attach it to. But because I told it the unique ID of that root, now it's able to attach this to the correct unique ID. So now if we run this version, now we see that we get our 2 different Pete Halsteds, and the invoices for them show up in the correct ones. And the magic of that, again, comes back to by creating the roots first. So the first thing we're doing is just creating a list of customer names. Then we're going through and adding all the invoices and using the same structure, customer name, invoice number, but we're tagging this tree ID onto the end of customer name so that it knows which Pete Halsted to use. Now, a couple other little bits and pieces on this tree add. This tree add, as you see, has a lot of parameters. This parameter, TV last plus TV accept duplicate, is about how they get sorted. By default, the TreeView absolutely wants to manage this thing for you 100%. So as you're adding things, it actually alphabetically sorts them. Well, in my instance, I want to sort them by most recent activity, invoice date, what have you. So I want them to go in the way I'm doing them. So I say I want TV last, which means it's going to put it at the bottom of whatever node it attaches to. It's going to be the last record. So then when the next one comes in, it'll go below that, and it'll build it in the exact order I'm telling it to build it. So that's what TV last is for. You also have TV first if you want it to be the top leaf of a node. And then, like I said, the default is alpha, which means that it'll sort it just alphabetically, and no matter what order you put them in, they'll be shown in alphabetical order. The other very important part is the TV accept duplicate. What that does is say to allow duplicates. If I didn't turn that on and I sent in 2 invoice number 1s without specifying a unique ID for each one, it would actually, the tree add statement would fail on that second add. So you need to let it know that you want it to allow duplicates.
Hey, Pete?
Excuse yes, sir.
Me. I didn't understand. I missed where you said how do you get it to be alphabetical order.
But if I were to not say TV last, it would be in alphabetical order. It's actually a different property. TV. Oh, I'll see what you did, Arnold.
It's on mine. Peter Pan, Peter, Pete, Herman. So that was.
Hang on just a second here.
So it seemed to me when I was looking at it, I go, that doesn't tell me specifically that it's in alphabetical order. It just tells me.
Hang on a second, I got to get back over there now. If you do TV, say alpha sort, that is the default. And that will sort the nodes and leaves in alphabetical order. Instead of doing them in the order that.
According to the name, not the ID.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Whatever, you know, it would sort. It would sort Herman, Pete, Snow White, and it would sort invoice 1, invoice 2, in that order. And and I'd have to play with it to see whether or not, my data maybe just happen to be in that same order. But that's what it's about. The TV last lets me put it in the order I want it to go in instead of sorting it alphabetically.
Okay.
And then that last parameter out here at the very end is a tooltip. And we'll see that if we hover over these things. The invoices have tooltips on them.
No, that's handy.
So that's a nice way to give additional information. Like I said, this makes depending on your type of app, it makes for a really neat little shortcut menu type thing. And like I said, we're also this one's not running. Let's rerun it. We're getting both the customer ID and the invoice ID. And the reason we're getting both of those now in this version is because I gave, when I built this level, when I built just the customer level, I said the unique ID was customer ID. And I'll show you the code behind the Cliq here in a minute so we'll know how I'm telling the difference there. So that tells me it's the customer ID for this, but when I click on there, I'm getting invoice ID, so I can do different behavior based on whether you clicked on a customer or you clicked on an invoice. So, it makes for a very nice jump interface type of thing. Now, when I did it the wrong way, notice I don't get any ID for those customers, so I couldn't do anything with the customers. And the reason why is I didn't actually create that node or the root. It had to create that root because of the leaf I built. It was creating the roots automatically, so the roots don't have any ID associated with them. And that's the reason I had to go back and do the code the other way, so that I built these roots myself and got the IDs. Now, by default, you get these graphics, the little open and closed folders, which, they're okay, but you want to do something a little different. I don't generally do open and closes because they're so small anyway. These things are 16 by 16 pixels.
You can change those on.
So I make the open and close the same. Yeah. And I'll show you in just a second where that code is. So now you're seeing I've got a different graphic for the customer versus the invoices. Now, how did I do that? Let me come back over to the code. The code looks exactly the same, except for this is your open graphic, this is your closed graphic. I was using TV default in the first set of code we looked at. In this code, I'm actually specifying a graphic name. And same here. So when I'm putting the customers out, I'm using this graphic. When I'm putting the invoices out, I'm using this graphic. And as Andy alluded to, I could have some logic in here that says, well, if the invoice amount is over $5,000, show a $ graphic here.
Yep.
And now when you're looking at your tree view, your menu, you would see the invoices that are over 5,000 with a different graphic next to them. And I do that for a lot of different things. I'll actually show different graphics to mean different things, so that that menu becomes, a very informative, quick start jump menu. It really lends itself well to a CRM style of system.
So would you put an if statement after the for each with a property assignment or something like that?
Me for the
What I would do is say if invoice number, if invoice amount greater than 5,000, image equals image 1, else image equals image 2, and then I would use that variable here.
Oh, okay. You would have put a variable there. I got it. Okay. I thought maybe you would use a. Let's see. But let's see. You have two images, right? One for open, one for close.
One for open and one for closed. I use the same for both because, again, it's 16 by 16 pixels. Yeah. So, and last little tidbit, and I think it was it John or Wolfgang? One of them gave us that Metro Studio. That's where these icons came from. It took me all of 10 seconds last night to generate these two icons. I love that little Metro Studio program.
You do have 2 questions when you're ready for them.
All right. Yeah, I think we're pretty well through the demonstration, and yeah, like I said, it is confusing. It's a little tough to work with. You're going to see that you have a lot more power and ease of use with what Andy's going to show you with the table view, tree view table instead. And in WinDev, I absolutely use the table version. I never use the TreeView version, and the only reason I used the TreeView version in this instance is because that's all that is available in WebDev. So let's see here. Will you show where you put the code for the tooltips? Yeah, from what I understand, version 18 of WebDev does include the table view tree, or the tree view table control.
Yeah. Say that fast again 5 times.
Me and Arnold had a little who's on first stint this morning as he was typing the descriptions. He says, "You're talking about the same thing." No, we're not. Okay, where's the tooltip? The tooltip is the last parameter of the tree add statement. So for the customers, I'm using customer phone as a tooltip. And for the invoices, I'm using the comment field that comes off of the invoice record for the tooltip. And that's how I'm generating these different tooltips. Mm-hmm. And notice this Pete Halsted, this is another way that we can see that these are different customers. This Pete Halsted has a phone. This Pete Halsted does not have a phone.
The poor one and the rich one.
Exactly.
Hey, so you were going to tell us how you got your customer ID versus the invoice number up on the top right there.
Oh, the Cliq Code, yes. Let me jump over and answer Chris's first question there. And the wrong code, did you leave out the leaf ID parameter? No. The problem is you only have one parameter. So my problem with my wrong code was that I was just building the lease and giving the lease the invoice ID. The problem is that builds the roots automatically, and of course the roots can't get a different ID on them because it's building them automatically. In the right code, I'm building the roots with their own ID of the customer ID. Then I'm building the lease with their own ID, and I'm using this tree ID function as part of building that so that it knows which one of these roots to attach itself to. I have not played with the scroll bar, but I believe if you put it inside a cell that has a scroll bar, you would get a scroll bar. The control itself does not have a scroll bar. It just grows. But I believe, if you were to go into the style and do the overflow, you could probably do a scroll bar there. But I have not played with that, Chris. The Cliq Code. Here is the Cliq Code, and there's a couple of different ways to go about this. For my use, there is a function that will tell you whether what you're clicking on is a node or a leaf. But that function didn't work well for me because of the way I'm structuring it. If a customer didn't have any invoices, it would consider that a leaf because, again, all it does is consider whatever the bottom rung of that particular branch is a leaf. So if you have a customer with no invoices, well, that's a leaf. Even though it's a customer, it's still a leaf because it's the bottom rung. So what I did instead of using those two functions was I count the number of tabs. And what do I mean by that? Let me show you. Remember, when we're building this thing, we're putting a tab in between each rung. You know, we're saying customer name, tab, invoice number. So by doing that, that's how it builds its, each tab means go down a level. But that also means that when we look at the selection, when the tree select here will return that entire string to me. It will return Pete Halsted tab invoice number 1. So when I look at that string, if it's got a tab in it, if I look at it, if I click on this one, the string that I'm getting back, and it's probably just easier for me to do this real quick. Let's do this. Let's say see what that tree select is telling us. That now these squirrely characters out here is that tree ID, so ignore those. But we see that Herman Munster is the string we're getting back, and there is no tab character. Now, if we do this one, that squirrely character there is a tab, and if I'd done this in trace, we would be able to see the escape characters. Let me go back and do it in trace instead. Okay, let's look at that trace. That's much better. See the tab character in the second click? In the first one, all I got back was Herman Munster, and then this is that unique identifier. In the second one, I get back Herman Munster, his unique identifier. That tree ID is what stuck that in there. And then I get that tab key, and then I get the invoice number and its unique identifier. So by looking for whether or not there's a tab, I know whether you clicked on a customer or an invoice, because an invoice is always going to have a tab. Now, if I'd gone one more level down and done invoice detail records, well, then I would have customers wouldn't have any tabs, invoices would have one tab, invoice details would have 2 tabs. So from there, my code simply needs to know how many tabs you have. So all I'm doing is using the position function to find out how many tabs are in that string. If there's no tabs, I know I'm using a customer ID because you clicked on a customer record. If there is one tab, well, then I know it's an invoice ID. And then tree identifier is a function that returns that unique ID assigned to that node or leaf. So tree select tells me which one you've selected, and then once I get that, then I can get the identifier for it, and I'm just counting the tabs to know whether you clicked on a customer or an invoice. And then, of course, from here, you've got the unique ID. For a customer or an invoice, you could open a different page, look up the customer record, do whatever you need to do from there.
Oh, that could have been
That
could have been a method call to just pass customer ID or invoice ID.
Yeah, well, it's actually in my real code. All this is wrapped in a class. This entire menu is managed by a class in my real code.
Cool. But this shows it well, though. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, it's it's always easier to learn and test procedurally than turn it into a class.
Do you have?
So that's it. Unless we have any more questions.
Do you have a scroll bar?
Like I said, it takes a little to get it figured out, but I think it's worth the work because it really does. In the right application, it makes for a very nice little interface.
Yeah, Chris asks if you have a lot of leaves, does a scroll bar show up somewhere?
Yeah, we already answered that.
I was sleeping, huh?
Yeah. That California time. Go back and watch the video later,
Okay,
Arnold.
thank you. Okay, so if we're all done, no questions, and we're gonna shut Pete off and bring Andy on. So no other questions.
All right,
Thank you so much again, Uncle Pete.
You're cool. All right, one quick thing, Arnold. There will not be an Uncle Pete's Corner next week. Uncle Pete will be in Biloxi looking for a apartment next week.
Ooh.
So no Uncle Pete's Corner next week.
No number 5 next week. The week after. The week after I might be in Texas, so I don't know if we'll have a number 5.
Oh my goodness! You actually going to real country?
Yeah.
Wow.
Gotta check my property.
Andy, have they relaxed the border guards or what? They're really going to let Arnold in?
You can pull that Hawaiian card and they may let him in. Now the deal is they may be talking about that he's going to Austin. See if he goes to North Austin, they'll let him in on a provisional visa because they think that they can keep him corralled right around Austin.
Stop the recording? I'm going to stop the recording
now.